So once you've done that, you may or may not see the following question. Okay, some of you might see this question if potentially you will have a more simplified FAFSA experience depending on the parent income and tax questions which were answered previously. You might qualify for a more simplified experience. Okay, and so if that's a possibility for you, you're going to see this question. All right, and that's what this question is trying to do. This question is trying to determine if you will have a more simplified FAFSA experience. And this question is asking if the parent in 2020 filed using a Schedule 1. And you'll see that question. Did your parents file a Schedule 1? Now, you can answer no to this question. You can say no to this question if your parents didn't file using Schedule 1. So that's pretty straightforward, right? No, if your parents didn't file Schedule 1. If your parents did use Schedule 1, you'll say yes. But here's some little extra guidance, and we see that kind of in the way that this question is presented. Or remember, just as a reminder, there's that little gray question mark icon. So anytime you encounter a question where you just need a little extra feedback, you want some more clarification, if it just seems confusing, you need some additional support, select that question mark icon, and then you're going to see that there's a little window that opens up that will provide you some additional guidance. So this is a good place to select that question mark icon too. But you can actually answer no to this question. You can answer no to this question if the only reason your parents filed using a Schedule 1 was to report one or more of the following items. And you'll see those indicated on here: unemployment compensation, an educator expense, IRA deduction, student loan interest deduction, or an Alaska Permanent Fund dividend. All right. So to reiterate, this question wants to know, did your parents file using a Schedule 1? If they didn't, you can say no. But if the only reason they filed using a Schedule 1 was to report one or more of those items, then you can also say no to this question. So do work on this particular question a little carefully. You don't want to make a mistake and misanswer this question, answer this question incorrectly, because it could be the difference between you having a more simplified experience or not. All right. So once you've made your response to this question, you can select continue and move forward. Or depending on how you answer this question, if you answer yes to this question, then you'll see this additional question. Okay. So once again, the FAFSA is just trying to see if you can qualify for a more simplified experience, but you do want to make sure to answer these questions accurately. So if you answer yes to that question about Schedule 1, then you will see an additional question asking, as of today, so as of the date that you're filling out the application, do you have a parent or are either of your parents a dislocated worker? You'll notice that dislocated worker, that term is hyperlinked, is the color blue. So it's hyperlinked. It's letting you know, hey, click on me. So you can click on that word. You can select that question mark icon for some additional guidance, and you'll see a definition about what a dislocated worker is. So do make sure that you're reading that if you think that your parent might qualify. And so you'll answer accordingly, yes, no, don't know to that question. And depending on how you answer that question, you might see this additional question. And once again, the FAFSA is just trying to see if you qualify for a more simplified experience. And so if you see this question, you'll read that in 2020 or 2021, did you as the student, did anyone in your parents' household qualify for any of the following federal benefits? All right. So in 2020 or this year in 2021, you as the student, parents, anyone in the parents' household, are any of you receiving those federal benefits? And you'll see that there are different benefits listed, benefits such as Medicaid, SSI, SNAP, etc. You're going to select each one that applies. If none of those apply, that's fine. Just select none of the above, and then you'll move forward once you've made your selections. All right, so the next question, we're getting back to the tax questions. So we just spent some time going through some questions to see if we qualify for a more simplified experience. Now, the next tax question is asking about income taxes paid. The FAFSA wants us to enter the amount of parents' income tax which was paid for 2020. And once again, we see that guidance saying that the amount is found on IRS 1040, line 22. And then we also want to subtract. We want to minus any amount on Schedule 2, line 2. Once again, if we don't have a Schedule 2, that's okay. Not everyone needs to use Schedule 2. So here's an example of the 1040 where we want to look. There's line 22. So make sure you're checking that. Line 22. If this happens to be a negative amount, just enter 0. Okay. So for this question, for the taxes paid, if it's negative, enter 0. If your parent's tax return has a Schedule 2, pay close attention to whether anything is reported on line 2. If nothing is here, if this is blank, just treat it as 0. That's fine. Then you would only look at the 1040 line 22. Once we've answered that question about income taxes paid, we're going to see a section, a page that has a lot of other items, a lot of other items, tax items that we may or may not need to report. All right, so this is a great page to just carefully work through each item. You'll see at the top, this is for tax filers only, so this is ultimately found on the parent's tax return. We see a question which asks, did your parents have any of the following items? So do any of these apply from 2020? Enter amounts for all that apply. So look through each one. This is also a great place to use that question mark icon for some additional explanation. Also for a visual, you'll see a visual, a screenshot, similar to what we've been providing, showing you where on the tax form to look. You'll see the fields highlighted to help guide you on where to look on the tax return. So you'll look through each one, and if there's something that doesn't apply, that's fine. You'll see for the first one, we might need to report combat pay or special combat pay, depending if this is true for your parent's situation. With combat pay or special combat pay, this is only applicable if your parents are in the armed forces, in a combat zone, so if that doesn't apply, it's okay that that's 0. The next one asks about student college grant and scholarships, financial aid that's reported as income for the parents. So that may or may not be true, right? Depending on your parent's situation. If in 2020, if your parents weren't in college, then they wouldn't have had financial aid to report as income. So once again, to reiterate, each of these items may or may not apply. So it's okay if something is 0. You can also look at the tax form to see if anything's reported. And that question mark icon will help to provide you that visual if you need assistance looking at knowing where to look on the tax return. So you'll go through each of those items, report them as they apply. Once you've finished this section, you can then select continue to move forward. At this point, we may or may not need to report some additional financial information. The parent wants, the FAFSA wants to know if for the parent, if any of the following items apply for 2020. Items such as child support that the parents have paid because of a divorce or separation. The FAFSA wants to know, does your parent have any earnings, any income from specific types of college employment opportunities? And you'll see those explained, the cooperative education program or federal work study. Once again, if something doesn't apply or if they all don't apply, you can leave this as 0. Or if you do need to report the amount, make sure to enter that accordingly. And you'll select continue once you're ready to move forward. We are now asked about parent untaxed income from 2020. So we're still in this parent section. The question reads, did your parents have any of the following items in 2020? Did your parents have any of these types of untaxed income, specific types of untaxed income? And once again, look through each item, see if any of those apply. So in our screenshot here, if your parents have received any child support, you'll have to report that. If your parents have received living allowances, cash payments, for example, because they're in the military or a clergy member, then you'll have to report that. If your parents have been contributing toward retirement plans through tax deferred pensions or retirement savings plans, then you might need to report that. You'll want to look at the W-2 and you'll see that guidance on the FAFSA, right? You'll see the instructions, look at the W-2 form, look at these boxes, etc. And as a reminder, you have that question mark icon that you can select as well in order to assist you with knowing where to look. So this section is just asking about untaxed income. Look through each item to see if any of those untaxed income items apply for your parents or parent. If not, leave it at 0. If so, report that amount and you'll continue once you're ready. Okay, at this point, the FAFSA wants to know if any parent asset information needs to be reported. Now, you might be wondering, okay, what's considered an asset? I'm glad you asked. You can select that word assets. You'll see that once again in blue hyperlinked. If you select that word assets or the question mark icon, you'll see additional guidance and an explanation of what is considered an asset. Just as a high level overview for financial aid purposes, for the FAFSA application, assets include the value of cash that your parent has on hand, and then the amount in a checking and savings account. Assets are also going to include the net worth of investments, which can include real estate. Now, don't report the value of your home, of your principal place of residence. If your parents are homeowners and you only have that one property, that's where you're living, that's your home, you don't need to report the value of that. If your parents have other properties, if they own multiple properties, have rental properties, right, then you might want to consider the net worth, right, the net worth of that. And an asset is also includes the net worth of businesses or investment farms. Now, this has to be a larger operation. Okay, if it's a small business, then you don't necessarily have to report it. You only have to report a business or investment farm that has more than 100 full-time employees. Okay. Now, with this whole idea of assets, for both parents and students, you both get asked this question. Okay, so for you as the student or your parent, the FAFSA might need to ask you about this asset information. So yes, we're looking at parent assets right now in our example, but as we'll see, eventually we'll have to report student assets. So an asset for the FAFSA application includes those items. Once again, the value of cash on hand, the amount in a checking and savings account, the net worth of investments, including real estate. Once again, don't include your main place of residence, and then the net worth of a business or investment farm, but it has to be a larger operation, more than 100 full-time employees. Something to consider, an important point, is that the value of your assets that you have to report or that you have to consider is as of today. So as of the date, meaning as of the date that you're submitting the application. Okay, so keep that in mind. It's not going to be the value based on 2020 or the value based on next quarter or something like that, or when you're planning on maybe selling an asset, right? It's just it's as of today. So as of today, what is the value today, the day that you're submitting and completing your FAFSA application? The question that we saw that's presented on the FAFSA for parent asset information is going to say, as of today, does the total amount of your parents' current assets exceed X amount? In our example, the amount is 5,400, but this amount is actually going to vary. This amount is going to look different depending on some of that previous information you entered. Depending on the parent information that you entered, that number is going to change, all right? So this might look differently for you. In our example, the question is asking, does the parent's assets exceed $5,400? If the answer is no to that question, if you're looking at that question and you see that amount and your parents' assets don't exceed that amount, then you can say no. You can say no, and then you move forward. But if your parents' assets do exceed that amount that you see on the screen, you will answer yes. That you would see on your application, you would say yes, and then you'll have to report the value of those assets. So once again, if you say yes, then you'll have to report the total in terms of cash, savings, and in a checking account, net worth of investments, etc. Once you've answered this question, you can then move forward with the application. And at this point, we're now entering the student financial section. All right, so as a reminder, the financial questions for the student are actually identical. They're actually identical as those for the parent. So we've already kind of worked through these questions. We'll still look through each one accordingly, but we won't show all the examples of the tax forms, etc. But the questions are going to be identical. However, these questions are for the student. Okay, for those of you who are dependent students who are providing that parent information, you would have already reported parent information, and now you have this separate section where you have to answer information about you as the student. All right. And for the student, or for those of you who are independent, if you're an independent student, meaning you don't need to provide parent information, or if you're unable to provide parent information because of a special circumstance, then you would see this section. You're just going to go straight to the student section. And these questions are asking about information from you as the student. The first question is asking if you filed taxes in 2020. And if you say, no, I didn't file taxes, I'm not required, then you have to still report income from working. You would see this question, did you as the student earn any income in 2020? If you as the student didn't work in 2020, you can enter 0. That's perfectly fine. If you did, just make sure to check that W-2 and report the amount accordingly and select continue. If you as the student, if you did file taxes in 2020, or if you will file, then you'll say will file or already completed, and then you're going to see those additional tax questions, just as we saw for the parent. You have to say what kind of tax return you filed, your tax filing status from 2020, and then you're going to see all of those same very exciting tax questions. For you as the student, if you filed taxes in 2020, you'll have to report that adjusted gross income. And as we saw, you look at that 1040, line 11, and the FAFSA does have that guidance built in. After you answer that question about adjusted gross income, you also have to provide the amount of income you earned from working, and you may need to refer to those different forms, right? If you have your own business, then you want to look at Schedule 1 and those applicable lines, etc. After answering that question, you have to report your income tax that was paid. And similar to what we saw from the parent income tax question, even for you as a student, if you file taxes, you're also looking at that 1040 form, for example, or your tax return to see how much of that income tax you paid, and you'll report it accordingly. Once you've done that, you also have all of those same tax items. All those tax items, you're going to look at your tax return and see if there's anything to report. Once again, look through each of those items, things like combat pay, financial aid reported as income, education credits, etc. So look through each item. If something doesn't apply, leave it at 0. If you're not sure, you can use that question mark icon that'll show you where to look on the tax return. There's some guidance right on the FAFSA application. And of course, if questions come up, please submit your questions through that Q&A feature. We're happy to help. We're also going to have that live Q&A workshop taking place following this FAFSA workshop. That's going to be another great opportunity to have your questions answered. The next part of the FAFSA is asking under this student financials section is going to ask for some of those additional items. All right, things like whether you as the student paid any child support, or whether you as a student have any earnings, any income that was through a college employment program. So make sure to look at that. If it doesn't apply, leave it at 0. If it does, report the amounts, and then you'll select continue. At this point, you do have to report certain types of untaxed income. Once again, this is identical to what we saw for the parent untaxed income questions. On the FAFSA wants to know if in 2020, if you received certain types of untaxed income, things like child support that you received, or if you had living allowances paid because you're a member of the military or clergy, or if you're contributing toward retirement plans, etc. Look through each item, report as needed, and then select continue. At this point, you as the student are also asked for asset information. Now, some of you might not see this, just depending on how previous responses were provided. Okay, so once again, it kind of depends. We all have all of our situations are slightly different. We have some different backgrounds, etc. But some of you might not see this, some of you might. But if you do have to report your asset information, you as the student, then once again, you will see an indication to report the value as of today. So as of the date that you're completing and submitting your FAFSA, you'll have to report the amount that you have of cash, the value of a checking or savings account, net worth of your investments, and then those larger business or investment farms, okay? For those of you who are dependent students, you have to report this. You don't see that question asking you, does the amount of your assets exceed, is it more than this amount? So if you're a dependent student, you just have to report it. If you're an independent student, if you don't have parent information on your application, then you're going to see that question. You might see that question posed, do your assets exceed the amount? Once again, it just depends on how your FAFSA has been filled out, but Make sure to report that asset information accordingly. Once you have that provided, you'll select continue. At this point of the FAFSA, we're nearing completion of the application. Some of you might see this following screen, and we'd like to talk about it briefly. As Paola walked us through the application earlier, if we're a dependent student, then we have to provide parent information. And if we are able to provide parent information, then there is a demographics section. There's a section where we're providing things like the parent's name, date of birth, and the FAFSA still asks us to provide a parent social security number. Now, some of us might not have parents with a social security number. And if that's the case, that's fine. On the FAFSA, you're actually going to just report all zeros. You'll see that on the screen in that red box. In parentheses, we see 0, 0, 0. If that's your situation where your parent or both parents don't have a social security number, you're going to input all zeros, and you're still able to submit the FAFSA application. However, you might see this screen. If your parents filed taxes and if they don't have a social security number, then you're going to see this screen, and it looks like there's an error, like something's wrong. The FAFSA just wants to confirm, the FAFSA just wants to validate that this is accurate. Okay, so if this is accurate, if that's true that your parent or both parents don't have a social, they filed taxes, then you can select check for errors. If both of your parents, if you have two parents and if both parents don't have a social, then you'll have to do this twice. Okay, so you'll select check for errors twice. And once you do that, you'll have the opportunity to move forward with the application. At this point, we're on the FAFSA summary screen. So this is providing us a summary, an overview of all of our responses. And we really want to encourage you all to double check, triple check all of your answers, make sure that everything is correct. The answers you're providing on your FAFSA application are used to calculate a score which has a large effect on your financial aid eligibility. So it's very important that your answers are accurate. Make sure to look through this. We all make mistakes. We all make little mistakes. So make sure to double check, triple check, everything is correct. If there was a mistake, if you overlooked something, if you added a little extra zero, you got excited entering that income, right? You can always go back to that question. You can select the question on this screen. The FAFSA will take you back to that question, and you can make your adjustment. After looking through that summary screen, you'll select continue, and we're now on that final section. So we're getting there. We're getting there. I know we're all very eager to submit our application, to sign and submit. So this is what we'll see once we're on the sign and submit section rather. For you as the student, as you're completing your application, you'll then enter this sign and submit section. As the student, you're going to electronically sign this application. You would have logged into the FAFSA using your federal student aid ID, your username and password, and you're providing your signature electronically. What you need to do as the student is you'll look through those terms and conditions. You do have to agree. You have to agree to the terms and conditions before signing your application. So you'll select that checkbox saying, I, the student, Joe Mounty, in this case, agree to those terms and conditions, and then you're signing the FAFSA form. If you're an independent student, meaning you don't have parent information, at that point you're done. You're going to see a congratulations screen. We'll see that shortly. But if you as the student are dependent and you're able to provide your parents' information, then you're going to see the following screen. You'll notice that there's a tile for the student indicating that the student has signed, but there's a separate tile for the parent. In this case, for a dependent student, parent signature is required. As Paola shared with us earlier, your parents have a couple of options to sign the application. Your parent can electronically sign the application by using a federal student aid ID. In order to create that federal student aid ID, your parent does need a social security number, and your parent would want to go to the FSAID website, fsaid.ed.gov website to provide or to create their specific username and password. So the parents would have their own separate username and password. And so once your parent has that, they could even create it right now. Once that's created, your parent can then electronically sign using that FSAID username and password. Now, if your parent doesn't have a social, or if they don't want to create that online FSA ID, that's fine. Your parent has the option to manually sign the FAFSA application. There's a signature page that would get printed out, and your parent can provide their signature accordingly, and we'll show an example of what that looks like. Either way, your parent will need to sign, so your parent will want to select provide parent signature. Now, if you have two parents on your application, you have to indicate, okay, which parent's going to sign, all right? So if you have two parents, this could be a nice time for your parents to decide. They can arm wrestle to see who's going to sign, play rock, paper, scissors, something, right? But you'll have to indicate which parent wants to sign the application. If you have two parents, or if you have one parent, then that parent will sign. And so you'll see that you can indicate which parent will provide their parent signature. Your parents will also need to accept the terms and conditions in order to provide their signature. Once your parent has done that, your parent can then sign the application. If your parent will use their federal student aid ID, their username and password, then at this point, that parent will enter the username and password. So they'll enter that information and then select sign and submit FAFSA form, which at that point, you've done it. Congratulations. At that point, you'll see this confirmation screen. Once your parent has provided their online signature using that federal student aid ID, their individual parent username and password, that separate ID. If your parent prefers to provide their signature, or if your parent can't create the FSA ID, then there is the signature page option. So you can see there's the opportunity to print a signature page. You'll want to indicate that option, select that button to print the signature page. And then you'll see a screen that looks like this. As you're printing the signature page, you can download this as a PDF. If you're connected to a printer, you can have that sent to your printer and print it out. You'll see that the signature page will look like this. It'll contain your information. You'll want to print that out. On that signature page, you'll see there's an address provided. Under step 3, you will have your parent hand sign that application, and this does need to get mailed out. Make sure to mail this to the address contained on step 3 of your signature page in order for the signature to get processed. For those of you who are going to have a signature page printed out, make sure that, yes, you do download the PDF file, you do print it out, and that you select finish. On the online application, still select finish. For those of you printing that signature page, you'll see that there's that yellow marker, that yellow indicator saying signature page has been printed. And for those of you printing the signature page, we want you to submit your FAFSA. We really want you to meet that March 2nd deadline. So do make sure that you submit your FAFSA. That will help ensure that you have met the March 2nd deadline. Now, please keep in mind, if your parent is providing their hand signature, submitting that signature page by mail, your FAFSA is not completed until that has been mailed out and until that has been processed via the federal center, via the address that you're sending it to. So do make sure that, yes, you're submitting your online FAFSA, and then make sure that you're also mailing out that signature page, okay? And once that's done, you're also seeing that confirmation screen, that congratulations, and you're also sent an email, a confirmation email to the email address you would have provided, also confirming that your FAFSA has been submitted. So well done, and congratulations that we have completed the FAFSA application. I hope that you all have a greater understanding, first of all, about what financial aid is. Paola walked us through that valuable financial aid 101 information where we learned about what financial aid is. This is money that will help you pay for college. We learned about those different options. There's free money options, earned money, and borrowed money. And then we learned about how to apply some of those documents we needed. And we looked at the application. We walked through it step by step. Now, some of you may have been working on your FAFSA concurrently at the same time as this presentation. So I love that you're doing that. I hope that you're making progress and that you're working towards reaching that finish line and submitting your application. Some of you are ready to get started. We've looked at the application. We're going to have a live Q&A workshop shortly where financial aid experts were here to help answer all of your questions, to guide you through that application. As you run into questions or any challenges, you can submit those questions, those concerns via that Q&A feature, and we're here to help you out. And we look forward to supporting you. let's talk about, before we get into that live Q&A workshop, let's talk about what to expect. We've spent a lot of time looking at the application. Let's briefly talk about more or less what's going to happen after you submit your application. Here's a summary of that process. We do want you all to submit your application today. That's the goal. That's the objective. Finish your application today. And if you do that, you're meeting that March 2nd deadline. That March 2nd deadline is not an issue if you take care of it. As Paola shared with us, March 2nd is an important financial aid deadline. So if you really want to potentially maximize your opportunities, make sure to finish this by March 2nd, which of course, if you're doing that today, you're good to go. Afterwards, check your email. That email address that you've provided, you as the student, you're going to get updates. You'll get a confirmation email letting you know that your FAFSA was completed, that your FAFSA was processed. That's another good one to get. And once your FAFSA is processed, you'll get an email that provides you information about a student aid report. That's going to be very useful. Just a few comments on the student aid report. This report is going to contain useful information about your eligibility. This report also provides a summary of all of your FAFSA responses. This is another great opportunity to double check, triple check, just comb through all of your responses to make sure nothing was incorrect. If you did find a mistake, no worries. If there's a mistake, something that was wrong at the time of originally doing your FAFSA, you can always re-log in and make a correction if something was incorrect when you first completed that application. And your student aid report also will provide you your expected family contribution, your EFC score. That's the score I referred to earlier, the score that has a large effect on your possible financial aid options. So you'll see your score, and your student aid report will also provide you an estimate of how much in grants and loans you might qualify for. That's going to provide you a helpful approximation, right, of your federal eligibility. Those of you who are continuing students, if you've received financial aid in the past or just thinking in the future, some years from now, if you're receiving federal aid, your student aid report will actually track how much in grants you've received and your loan borrowing history. If you as the student, if you've chosen to take out federal loans, your student aid report also provides you that information. That's going to be very useful to help you keep track of how much you've received. We also recommend that you start taking a look at any messages, any emails, any communications, any letters that colleges are sending you. Remember, you're including colleges on your FAFSA application. Those schools included on your FAFSA will get a copy of your application. And it's very common that they will begin to start communicating with you, letting you know if there's required documentation, letting you know what options you are eligible to receive. So you want to make sure to pay close attention to all of that. Some of you might think about enrolling in college summer of 2022, whether that means that you've finished high school and you want to get an early start. I do hope that all of you consider continuing with your learning here at Mount SAC and that you take advantage of our summer programs, especially for those of you finishing high school. We have amazing summer programs that really support your transition, that will enhance your college experience, that come with it amazing, amazing benefits and opportunities. And so if you're considering coming to Mount SAC summer 2022, or if you're continuing with your learning, maybe you're already a college student, whether that's here at Mount SAC or elsewhere, but if you're enrolling summer 2022, then we do recommend complete the 2021-22 FAFSA. What we've done is we've looked at the newer application, the 2022-23, and that's covering you for the school year, which begins fall 2022. Those of you enrolling summer 2022 or think it just might be an option for you, just take care of the 2021-22 FAFSA, that older FAFSA. It's essentially the same, with the exception that the older application does look at 2019 income. So just keep in mind that the income tax year is different, and you would see that on the questions. Of course, we encourage you all, ask questions. Make sure to reach out, especially today while we're here during this Cash for College event. Ask your questions. I'm so happy you've been submitting your questions throughout this presentation. We are going to have that live Q&A workshop in a few minutes. Two of those live Q&A workshops, one taking place at between 11 to 12 and another between 1 to 2 p.m. But even beyond this Cash for College workshop, know that the Mount SAC Financial Aid Office, we're here. Consider this an invitation. Connect with us. We're happy to support you, to answer your questions, whether that's by phone, via our virtual assistance options, and we are also open on campus for in-person support. So you can always drop by, say hello, have your questions answered. We're happy to serve as a resource for you. I do want to spend a few moments speaking about our amazing student survey. And this has been brought up a few times because we're very excited about the opportunity for you to possibly win a scholarship. So do complete the student survey. It's so important that we hear from you, that we hear your feedback. We're always looking for ways to enhance this event. We want to make it the best as the best event possible for you. We want to support you as best we can. So it's important that we hear from you, that you share your experience. There are a few ways to get to that survey. You can follow the link. There's a short link, bit.ly/fall21 C4C survey. If you enter that, that will directly take you to where you need to be. You'll see a nice handy dandy QR code. There's this square with all kinds of pixels. If you take out your smartphone, scan that QR code, that'll take you exactly where you need to be. Or we do have our toolkit, the toolkit which was shared with you via a pre-event email. That toolkit has also been shared in the chat box. That will take you where you need to go. There's a link for that survey, so do make sure to complete that. Those of you who submit that survey are entered for a chance to win a scholarship, so we really want to make sure that you also take advantage of that opportunity. We do also have a post-event resource webpage. This webpage is going to have a lot of useful videos, a recording of this event once available, and additional resources. You can also access this webpage via the website provided on the screen, bit.ly/C4C post-event. And you can also scan that QR code. This will get shared as well through that chat box, but we do encourage you all to take advantage of the resources here. We have some useful financial aid literacy videos where we go through the FAFSA and DREAM Act. We also will have a recording of this event once made available, and there's also going to be a link taking you to that survey on this webpage. As mentioned earlier, we encourage you all, stay connected with us. Know that you can have your questions answered, your financial aid application support needs assisted with via our office. So do make sure that you reach out. We're here to support you. Our office hours are provided on this screen. This is a great screen if you need to take a quick screen grab, a picture, right? You'll see our current office hours, contact information by phone, by email, our webpage. And those of you on Instagram, follow us at @MountSAC_FA. We have an Instagram account where we promote different workshops, different events. We also have great financial aid resources and information on there. So I want to thank you all for joining and participating. I hope that proved useful, helped you better understand financial aid, and helped you gain confidence and comfortability with the FAFSA application to support you completing that application. At this point, I will turn the virtual mic over to Desiree Marquez, who will walk us through the rest of today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rudy and Paola, for sharing your knowledge on the FAFSA application, and for all of the parents and family members, supporters, and students that are here getting this great info. Students and families, you're going to receive a post-event email with all of this information on how to access the recording presentation. I know many of you asked if this is going to be available after to re-review. So yes, it will. It takes about a week to get on board, to get online. So please know that within a week, you will receive an informational link directly to these pre-recordings, as well as with some other resources to help you through the financial aid application process. The email will contain the web link, and other instructional videos as well will be housed there. So please use that as a resource.